Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you for coming. First of all, I have to apologize for my bad English. I'm not really used to speaking English, mostly speaking German, sometimes in Arabic, but I'm not really used speaking in English. But the good thing is, if I don't find a word, I can say it in German, and I think that there will be a similar word in Dutch language, so you will understand me. The German people have an impression that Dutch is like a strange German, and I don't know if the Dutch people think that German is a strange Dutch. I'm not sure about this. Second thing is, I never saw such beautiful university campuses like this one. It's really beautiful here. I'm really impressed. We don't have in Germany universities like this. Okay. First question is, who of you is did some researches about medical ethics or read about medical ethics? Okay, there's one person. Okay, who is studying in field of medicine? Okay, okay, 5, 6, 7 persons. Okay, medical technology, biomedical. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is I will give you a short overview about the main questions of medical ethics and mainly practical, important medical questions of medical ethics. I will do this with a case study, a certain situation which happened in Germany and which makes very clear, even for non-experts, what medical ethics mean and why it is important to study it. The second thing is an overview about medical ethics and Islamic law. What does it mean? What does medical ethics mean, or what do medical ethics mean in Islamic theology? And then we will take some certain questions which are discussed in the Islamic literature. A short remark to my own biography. Actually, I studied social and cultural anthropology in Vienna, and shortly in time when I made my master there, they opened this they established a department for medical anthropology or ethnomedicine. So this is a kind of science which is studying the cultural background of medical systems, and what is the culture behind healing or concepts of illness and things like this. And at the same time, I was very interested in Islam, and so I got specialized in the field of Islamic medical ethics. And after that, I studied. I was in Syria, and I was just to learn Arabic first, and then I stayed there for many years, and I studied traditional Islamic sciences in Damascus. And then I returned, and now I'm teaching very theological, very classical theological things in the University of Osnabrück. It's called the Science of Quran and Hadith, Quran, Ulum and Hadith. But because I did my dissertation about medical ethics and Islamic medicine, I'm asked in Germany to speak like in hospitals and healthcare providers about Muslims in German hospitals and Islamic ethics and its relevance for dealing with Muslim patients and things like this. So it's it seems to be a very important kind of research now in this time, and really in German hospitals, they ask about how can we deal with the Muslim minorities in our hospitals, and this is a very important question. And so now in my professional life, I'm doing more research and more lectures about Islamic medicine than about my own work field, which is the science of Quran and Hadith. Okay. So the first point is the field of medical ethics. And I want to start with a situation which happened like 30 years ago, 1992. And it was became famous as the case of the Erlanger baby, the baby of Erlangen. Erlangen is a city in the south of Germany. And what happened was that a young lady had a car accident. She crashed against a tree, and she had very severe, how to call it, damages in her head. And the rescue team came. They made their reanimation techniques, but they saw that she most probably she will not survive. But they reanimated her into intubation and things like this, brought her to the hospital, to the University Hospital of Erlangen. Therefore, it's called the baby of Erlangen. And they made diagnosis that she deceased, and they diagnosed brain death. So she was seen as a deceased person, but because she was still, how to call it, how to call it in English, she was breathing by machine, how do you call it? After intubation, there was a machine which gave her which helped her in breathing, how to call it? In life support, okay. And so her body was still living. Her body is still living. Her brain is dead. So she was a brain death person. What do they do now? In Germany, of course, they need organs. So she was the best case of an organ donator because her body was fit, was not injured. Her brain was dead, so she was the best person to donate organs. But they have to bring the parents and ask them. They asked them for allowing organ explantation. So in the time when the parents were away in the hospital, they made like their medical tests, and they saw that this lady was pregnant and the embryo, the baby in her womb, was still alive. She was in the third month of pregnancy. What happened then was that they decided that they will not take organs from her. They will not let her die in a biological way, but they will still carry on with the life support, because they had some reports that in the United States there were some cases of post-mortal pregnancies. So it's possible to keep her alive biologically to save the life of the baby. The parents were against this. They didn't agree, but still they didn't have the right to oppose against it, and so they carried it on. And yeah, and there was a very, very big discussions in mass media about this case. And this was really a very important situation for the development of a public discussion of medical ethics in Germany, because there was a lot of things were discussed. First of all, the question of piety, of how do we treat deceased persons. Second thing, the discussions about a male medicine using the body of a woman to make some experiments. Third thing was the prenatal psychology and the idea of that, the knowledge that the emotional situation of a mother can have some influence on an unborn child. So what will be the influence of a deceased person, of a child growing up in a dead body? So and some other things. And this was a very difficult situation and a very important situation for the development of a public discussion about medical ethics in Germany. So if we see these points here, which are written here, and think about it in an ethical way, we see the main points of dilemmas or of problems in medical ethics now. The first thing was this intubation and life support and things like this. The rescue team, they saw that this lady will not survive. This was clear. But still, they tried to rescue her. So they knew that she will not be able to survive in a normal way. This is very clear for a medical doctor when you see this situation. And here there's a lot of questions which are connected to this first point. The questions of what kind of life do we have to save? And do we have to save every kind of life? Or could it be that a certain situation of a human being could be a reason to say, no, it's better not to save it? Yeah, and this is a very important question, especially in like things like prenatal diagnosis and yeah, things like this. Second point is the diagnosis of brain death. The diagnosis of brain death is still an issue which is very, very problematic. Even in Germany, there are a lot of new discussions about this. Why? Because since the 60s and the 60s, end of the 60s, they say that the brain death is a valid criteria of diagnosis of death. And this is like equal to the biological death. So biological death means that you see that the person doesn't breathe anymore, there's no heartbeat, the body gets cold. And so everyone would see that this person is deceased. In the brain, the problem in the brain, or the thing is that normally, like try to make it very easy, that you have the heart and breath system, and you have the brain system. And normally, the death of one leads to the diseasing of the second, or the stop the functions of the second. Yeah, the stop of the heartbeat makes destroys the cerebral system, or other way around. And since the 50s, it's possible to keep the body functions alive, even if the brain doesn't work. So the problem which occurred is that a new technique made it possible to keep these persons alive, but nobody knows if it's good to keep these persons alive. This is one point. The second point is that in the 60s, the idea of organ transplantation became important, and it was possible. And in 68, the first heart transplantation took place. And this was a very, very like a very big story, and all the newspapers talked about Christian Bernard and the first heart transplantation which he did. The problem in this story was that at this time there was not something called brain death. So a person was seen as being deceased after the complete biological death took place. The problem is that in this situation, you're not able to make a heart transplantation. The heart will not be well, or will not be useful for transplantation. And so it was not asked this time, because it was this time. It was the 60s. Was this time of the very economical development in Europe, and the first people landed on the moon, and then now it was even possible to replace the heart, like the center of the life. So death seemed to be something which can be avoided. Yeah? And the people were very happy about this, but nobody asked, or the people in the public discussion, nobody asked, how could he take a heart? It is a very, very critical question. And Christian Bernard was a French doctor. And the problematic thing is that the first heart transplantation took place in South Africa. And I think you can imagine what was the color of the the patient, how the skin color of the patient and the skin color of the donor. Yeah. So it was, and it's like a very critical point in the things. Yeah. It was like how could he take the heart of a person? So the patient, he passed away 10 days later because there was no medication for the suppression of the immune system. But it was still a critical thing. And then some weeks after that, there was a Harvard committee, a group of scientists in Harvard, and they say, we have to redefine death. We have to accept the brain death as a valid sign of death. And they had two arguments. The first argument was that there are too many people lying like in intensive care, and their heart, their brain death, suffering from brain death, but we have still to keep on supporting his life because he is still living. That's the first thing. And the second point was because we need organs. Yeah. And this is a very critical point. Yeah, and it's like the ethics of we decide something ethically because it is useful. Yeah. And this kind of this utilitarian ethics is like a kind of problematic things in medical ethics. The next thing is the next problem is the organ donation, and the question if it's really okay to bring the parents who just heard now that their 3-year-old daughter passed away, very surprisingly, in a car accident, and they ask now the parents, do you agree to organ explantation? I mean, are they really able to decide? This is one question. The second question is, do they have the right to decide because they're parents? The third question is, who has the right to decide? Yeah. I don't know how it's in Netherlands. In Austria, we have a regulation that every person who passes away is a possible donor, except he opposed to it. In Germany, we have this kind of we have the other solution that nobody is donor until we know that there's he agreed to it. But still, it's an organ donation is something which is, of course, we're happy that it exists. But from an ethical point of view, it's not easy to decide if it's really right to use the body of a deceased person. There was another case in Germany which was which led to some discussions about medical ethics and the rights of deceased persons. It was, you know, that in Germany we have a very strong car industry, and in car industry they have to make like security tests for their cars, like if the airbags really protect the people sitting in a car and things like this. And also in the 90s. There was information which was discussed in the public, in the mass media, that they found a new way of testing cars, and it is like crash tests with deceased persons. And normally, you know, a crash test means that you take a car and just, you know, let it crash into a wall, and then they have like dummies or puppets or something, and they look if the airbags really protected them. So with a human body, it's much more effective because they sit like a dead person in this car, crash against the wall, and then they can really examine how if there are like injuries in the organs and things like this. Yeah. And there was a big discussion about this, and then they stopped it because they say it's unethical, and nobody could accept this kind of test. But why? I mean, there's a public interest. And there's a general interest that the cars become safer, right? And if we say that we can use a human body for organ explantation, of course, the human body of a deceased person, why don't we have the right to use it for crash tests? Yeah, and what I want to tell you with this, that in medical ethics, there are a lot of like emotional criteria. Some things like seem to be like we cannot accept it emotionally. But the thing is, how can we discuss these things from an objective point of view? This is like the difficult thing in medical ethics. The next point, which is also in the European history very, very critical and very interesting, is the questions, the rights of unborn life. Does an embryo, which is like 3 months old, in this case of Erlangen, does it have a right to live? And does this right to live is enough to not to bury this deceased person? Yeah, and at which time in pregnancy the right to live starts? Yeah, and at which time of pregnancy, in which phase of pregnancy does it become an absolute right of life? Yeah, and you know that like the traditional Catholic position was abortion is what? It's murder. It's it's a crime from the very first day. Yeah. It's in the Catholic Church. There was like from the first day of pregnancy, making an abortion means killing a person. Yeah? And the very other way of the spectrum was like in some feministic discussions. They had a slogan. I don't know if it's in English. My womb belongs to me. Is it in English like this? My ones belong to me, and this like the two extremes of this in this discussion. And between there, a lot of different positions. And the problem is in the thing that pregnancy is a continual development of the human being. But there's no point where you can say at this point the human life starts. And this is the problematic thing in this. I mean, to claim that a cell which is like divided one time in two parts is a human being. It's really difficult to say this. The position of the Catholic Church is really difficult. At the same time, is like in German law, you have this 12 weeks. And in the first 12 weeks, it's not a crime to make an abortion. But what does change in the pregnancy from the 12th to the 13th week? This is a very, very difficult and you know all this discussion about this. And the last thing is interesting: the borders of piety. In the case of this woman who's in Erlangen, and she was there for like this experiment took about 2 months or 3 months, and she was like she was her life support, so she didn't die biologically. And the body was okay. The brain, she had this injuries in her brain, and then at a certain point in the in this time, there was a lack of very severe infections in the head, and so it is reported. I'm not really sure if it's right. There's one book which stated that there was a discussion between the medical doctors in this time that how can we manage these infections in her head? Okay, and everything seems to be good, but the injuries, the injured area in the head become as they develop these infections, and so the whole experiment and the whole life of the baby and her biological life seem to be in danger. So this reported that there was a discussions between the specialists about separating the head from the body. Yeah. How do you call it in English? Don't find the word. Yeah. To cut the head off. Beheading. Oh, yeah, beheading. Thank you. This was the word. Beheading. Yeah. As I told you, I'm not really sure. This was one book, one publication in which this discussion is mentioned. I didn't find it in any other publications. But even if it's made up in an interesting way, because if a story is made up, it's still interesting to think about it. Because everyone who hears it says like, no, that's no, we could never accept this thing like this. But if you think about it, what would it change? Why exactly this point is so how to call it, unacceptable? Yeah. Why should like an organ donation? I'm not against organ donations, but let's just discuss it from an ethical point of view. Why should an organ explantation could be acceptable, and this is unacceptable? And this is like the borders of what we accept and what we do not accept. Okay, so this was like I'm sorry, talk too much. This case, this Erlanger baby, I found it just interesting because it gives an overview about very important and critical issues in medical ethics. Yeah, and I found it very useful story and a useful kind of arranging bioethics or medical ethics, topics of medical ethics. So next point would be medical ethics and Islamic law. What is now the relation between these two things? How can, what does Islamic medical ethics mean? How can medical ethics become Islamic? The main point is here that being Muslim means to believe in the authority of a certain revelation, or to believe in a revelation from a certain source, and mainly Quran and the Sunnah, the sayings and the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ. So now, what Islamic medical ethics do is to ask about the things and relate the answers in any way to the idea of divine revelation. Yeah? And the idea of divine revelation in Islam means that first to believe in a creator, and second to believe that this creator wants something or demands something from human beings, forbids something, and there's a difference between things which are allowed and things which are not allowed, and things like this. So in Islamic medical ethics, they discuss these critical issues from this point of view. Generally, medicine has a very, very high respect in the mainstream of Islamic religious texts and Islamic religious authorities. There's a story about Imam Shafi'i, who lived in the second century of Islam, means in the 8th century after Christ, and he was asked which kind of knowledge has a higher importance, the knowledge of medicine or the science of medicine, and the knowledge about halal and haram, about the allowed and the forbidden in the religious sense. Okay? And he said that, or it's reported that he said that religion has a higher position because medicine cares about the worldly life and the worldly happiness of people, whereas the theology cares about the eternal happiness of people, and so the science of religion is higher and more important than medicine. So I don't think that the question is that the answer is so interesting, but the question is interesting, but because it shows what the medicine in this very, very early time of Islam was really high estimated and had a very, very high importance in the life, in the religious life of people even. And you know all the things about this, the history of medicine and the way how the Greek medicine was saved and developed in Arab cultures and things like this. But the first thing is that we say that principally medicine is something which is highly respected in Islam, first. But second is that Muslims and non-Muslims, both of them, see that not everything which is possible for medicine is really is in every case good for people. This is the main idea of medical ethics, is that we can do a lot of things, but we're not sure if all of the things are really useful for us as human beings. Yeah, and the same questions do also arise in Islamic theology. It was developed mainly for asking if a certain way of treating people should be allowed and should be allowed from an Islamic point of view, and the question if everything which we can do is also good in a religious way. Special questions about medical ethics, about the ethics and the legal regulations of medical interventions were developed in a very, very early time. The first discussion which we see is in a text of there's documentation about the discussion between Abu Hanifa and the students. Abu Hanifa is born 78, I think, after Hijrah, means in the end of the 1st century of Islam. And he discussed with his students, Imam Muhammad and Abu Yusuf, about the following question: is it allowed? Someone lose a tooth? Tooth or teeth? Tooth, thank you very much. Someone lose a tooth. I told you, I apologize for my bad English. Someone lose a tooth. So there were two questions. The first question is it allowed to replace this tooth to the same place? That is the first thing. The second question was, is it allowed to take a tooth from a deceased person and use it instead of your own tooth? It's a tooth transplantation. Yeah? The answer was interesting. Abu Hanifa said both of it is not allowed, because a separated part of the body has to be buried according to Islamic regulations. His students, Imam Muhammad and Abu Yusuf, said the first technique, replacing your own tooth, is allowed because you're like bringing it back to his own place. But the second thing, taking a tooth from a deceased person, is not allowed. Why? Because the body of a deceased person has to be respected and deserves the same respect as the body of a living person. Yeah? And this is related, this is interesting, it's related to a hadith, to a saying of the Prophet that his wife, Sayyidah Aisha, is reported to have said that the Prophet told her, Inna kasra azam al-mayyiti ki kasrihi hay'an, that the breaking the bone of a deceased person is the same like breaking the bone of a living person. Yeah? And this is something which established a concept of, it's called hurma, the concept that the body of a deceased person has to be protected and has a kind of how do you call it? A sacredness. Yes, it's sacred somehow. Yeah. And so there's a very, very early discussion about transplantation of body materials between people. The question is, what do we do with this text in this time now? And how do we use now this text? Can we say, okay, organ transplantation is haram, it's not allowed, because first the prophets is reported to have said that the breaking the bones of the dead is the same like, and so on. And the second thing is Abu Hanifa, this great scholar, said that it's not allowed to take a tooth and these things. How do the scholars now discuss this text? About the text of Abu Hanifa, the tooth story, we say that most of the scholars now allow organ transplantation. And when they ask about this story about Abu Hanifa, they would say the following. They would say, yes, Abu Hanifa is right. It's not allowed to do this. Or his students are right. It's not allowed to take the tooth of a deceased person to his own mouth, because the purpose of this operation is not strong enough, because it's just a cosmetic thing. You can live without this tooth. But like heart transplantation, lung transplantation, the benefit of it is so high that it makes it possible, or make it allowed to take a material from the deceased person. The second question, which is much more important, is the hadith. Breaking the bones of the deceased person is the same like breaking the bones of a living person. Yeah, and here the question is, what does the kind of comparing means? He compares two things. Compares the breaking of the one and the breaking of the breaking of the dead, the breaking of the living person. What does this comparison mean? And this is a very, very important question, because comparing two things, it's called tashbih in Arabic, is never a complete comparison. It means, like in Arabic, they say, like if someone loves his wife, he would say, "Oh, her face or your face is like the full moon." Okay, it's a very like a romantic expression of beautiness and so. Okay, يعني وجهك كالقمر. Okay, yeah, the full moon. So the question is, he said, your face is like the full moon. What does he mean? Does he mean as round as how do you call it, round, or how do you call it in English? This form, circular, as it looks like this, or does he mean it's as cold as the moon, or it is as how do you call it? The moon is like it has this how do you call it? Craters and rough. Yeah. Does he mean your face is as rough as the surface of the moon? No. He means one special thing. He means as shiny and as beautiful as the moon, right? So comparing two things is reduced to certain aspects. Yeah? And here the ulama asked, okay, the Prophet ﷺ, when he said this, what did he mean? Did he mean it's for the deceased person as painful as for the living person? If he means that, then it's impossible to take. It's impossible to take like an organ from a deceased person. We would never do this, right? Or does it mean it's as forbidden as from a living person? Then also we couldn't do it. Okay? And here the scholars look to the context of the hadith. Yeah? And they found one narration, many of these hadiths have several narrations, and one narration where there's given the context of the story. And the context of the story was that the Prophet ﷺ came to a cemetery, and he saw the man working there, and he just digging out the bones of deceased people and breaking them. The Prophet ﷺ said, according to this narration, the breaking of the bone of the deceased is the same as, it means don't do it without any necessity. Yani, bones of people are not like pieces of wood. It's something more. It's something sacred. Yeah? And with this concept and with this explanation, they could say, okay, the Prophet said a human body which is diseased has a certain kind of sacredness, a certain kind of protection and so on, but not in an absolute way. And if it's useful, and if it saves lives of other people, then we allow it. Yeah. And this is just one example of how the people discuss, how the discussions about the things developed in the Islamic history. The next point is, which is really important, who is involved in these discussions? There's a lot of Islamic literature about any kind of medical practices. I mean, organ transplantation, in vitro fertilization, stem cell research, cloning. I don't think that there's any kind of new medical technique which is not discussed in Islamic literature. And sometimes you're really astonished about in which parts of the Islamic world people write about it. Yeah? Like in the mountains of Yemen, people write like books about stem cell research. Yeah? They don't have it there, but they hear about it, and they feel that, okay, we have to respond to it, we have to prove it, we have to think about it, and things like this. Who is involved? Mainly, there are three kinds of authorship. The first thing is the Mufti, and it means the Islamic scholar, which tries to get some informations about medicine. Yeah? This was mainly in the modern literature in the 80s and 90s. There was a lot of people who are like they have Islamic knowledge. They're interested in medical questions, and so they try to inform themselves, and then they give a fatwa. And you can imagine that it's not really easy. I mean, if you think about stem cell research, for example, I mean, it's really not easy to understand what does it mean, or brain death, and it's not that you really need a lot of time and a lot of study to get into the things, to really imagine and to know what am I speaking about. And some of these scholars, of these Islamic scholars, really, you feel that they really understood and studied it, but in many fatwas, many Islamic texts, you find that they didn't understand what they're speaking about. Yeah, so you have like to see it from this critical point of view. The main actors in this field in the late 20th century are like just for people who are interested in these discussions, Mohammed Mukhtar al-Salami, the former Mufti of Tunisia, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi wrote some things, Sheikh Mohammed Ramadan al-Bouti wrote about it. Until now, Sheikh Ali Karadari. These are like these people who are the main players in this field. One thing. Second group of people are like medical doctors, who are Muslim medical doctors who are interested in these things and try to get some Islamic education to be able to answer these things. Yeah. And here you have a fact that these people understand the technique and understand the medical intervention, but sometimes they don't understand the theological points of view. Yeah? And then you have the third thing, which really got very popular in the Islamic world, like fiqh academies, like committees of, like a round table, and they're sitting like 5 Islamic scholars and 5 medical doctors and some stakeholders in public health and things, and they discuss a certain thing. Yeah? So that the muftis, the Islamic scholars, get their information from the experts of medicine. Yeah? Seems to be a very logical concept, right? But also this, I mean, it is a good concept, but even here you have some problems. For example, there are reports about a certain discussion about is in vitro fertilization allowed in Islamic law? And of course, there are some problems. I mean, it's not something which say, okay, no problem, just do it. Of course, there are some questions that have to be discussed. Okay. And the thing was that all the medical doctors sitting on this round table had their own in vitro fertilization or clinics for how they call it, medically supported reproduction in their home countries. So they have a very, very high economical interest to get it allowed. And we have to see this, that it's not just, you know, informations are not always objective. Yeah. And yeah. So, but the main point here is we have muftis who try to get into medicine. We have medical doctors who try to get to understand the Islamic law. And we have the idea of academies, of committees, of group discussions. And yeah. So we just mentioned one point. This was the transplantation and organ transplantation. And what I just want to give you now is a very short overview about two points of discussion in medical ethics. The first is the brain death. Yeah. And this was discussed in the Islamic law, in the Islamic world from the beginning of the 80s of the 20th century. 1980s, 82, 83, there was like a very big interest in the question if Islamic law supports the idea of brain death. Okay? Especially in Saudi Arabia. So now, just to understand the surroundings of these discussions, Saudi Arabia had a very, very big interest in the brain death concept. Why? Because, first of all, they have at this time a very good medical infrastructure. They had hospitals where they were able to make this kind of how to call it, of transplantations. One thing. Yeah? They had the technology and even the manpower to do it. Second, they have a very high rate of kidney diseases due to some circumstances. Yeah. Third, they had a very, very high percentage of young people dying in car accidents. And this is very interesting because you have in Saudi Arabia in the 80s, yeah, you have a very many young people. Yeah? At this time, male people, because women were at this time not allowed to drive a car. Oh, so male young people who at this time didn't work. At this time in Saudi Arabia, no Saudi citizen did work at this time, yeah, because they had the Indian and Pakistani workers who did all the work for them. Third, you had a lot of strong American cars. And the last point, which is very interesting, you didn't have an obligation for putting a seatbelt. And the combination of these facts lead to a very, very high percentage of donors. Because young people who die in a car accident without a seatbelt are normally the best candidates of organ donation. Yeah. So in Saudi Arabia, they had the interest they had a very strong interest in this issue. And to make a long story short, the most scholars in Islamic law accept the brain death criteria. This is one thing to say. The most Islamic scholars said, okay, we accept that the brain death is a kind of diagnosing the death of someone. Why? Because they say that we as Islamic scholars, as theological experts, we are not able to diagnose death. This is something which the medical doctors have to do. And we said if they do it and if they know at which point of life we can say that this life ended, then we as Islamic scholars have to accept it. Okay? Which seems to be very logical. Yeah? And so the mainstream of Islamic scholars say we accept brain death. A second point is the qiyas to pregnancy, because they say in Islamic theology they say that the pregnancy is a process in which first the embryo develops only in a biological way. It's just a biological building which becomes like more and more developed in certain stages, which are mentioned in Quran and so on. And at a certain point in the pregnancy, normally the most scholars said at the 120th day of pregnancy, the ruh, the soul, is like how do you call it? Is impregnated to the risen, thank you very much, to the translator, to the embryo. So what they say is that human life in pregnancy starts at this point, which is not a point which can be seen which is medically provable or something. It's just a point which is in the pregnancy. We don't see it, but we know about it from revelation. So, and now they say, in the first weeks of the pregnancy, let's say in the first months or after 100 days even, we see a heartbeat. Yeah? The heart of the embryo is beating. But according to the mainstream theology, it's not a human being still until the soul is given to the embryo. So what does it mean? It means that they say, okay, we have in pregnancy, we have a kind of life, which is a biological life, but it's not a human life. And so they say the brain death, the patient who is in a brain death situation is the same. It's still in a bodily, in a biological way, he's still alive. His heart is beating, supported by the machines. But he's not a human being, he's deceased. This is the main arguments here for the supporters of the brain death concept in Islamic law. But there are some people who oppose, who say, no, we cannot accept it in this way. And one of them is a Syrian scholar who is called Mohammed Said Ramadan al-Bouti. He was a very influential scholar in Syria, passed away 10 years ago. And he had a very interesting fatwa, legal, how do you call it, legal position against brain death. And I just mention it not because I'm against brain death something. I just mention it because it's interesting how people discuss it. He said, first of all, there are doubts about it. There are doubts about brain death, not in Islam from an Islamic point of view, but he says that even the medical experts, the doctors, they haven't until now not agreed about the exact meaning of brain death. And this is true. Until now, the discussions about how should it be diagnosed, which part of the brain has to be seen in this concept and so on. This is the first point. There are doubts in the discussions, and we're not completely sure. There's not completely yaqeen about it. First. Second thing is that he said that even in Islamic theology and Islamic law, there are doubts. We don't know it, and there's no agreement. The scholars and the experts have not completely agreed about at which part of and at which signs do really show me that this person passed away. Then he said there's a theoretical possibility of diagnostical mistakes. Yeah. So there's diagnosing that the brain, this is so complicated, and we are not completely sure if probably there could be a mistake in the technical equipment and things like this. The next point, he say there's a general ruling in Islamic law. It's called istishab al-asl. Istishab al-asl means if you know that a certain situation was existing, you know that, and you don't know exactly if this situation changed, then you have still to build your thinking about the first existing situation. For example, making wudu, making the ritual washing of for prayer. You know that I have, I know that I made my washing like 1 hour ago. I know it. And then I doubt probably I lost my tahara, my purity or not. In this case, you're allowed to pray because the first thing is sure, the second thing is not sure. Al-yaqin la yuzal bishak. And he said, in the case of this patient, we know that he was alive. This is for sure. Now, without about the question if he passed away or not. And he said, in this case, it's better to build your acting on the first thing, which was sure, and not build it on the second thing, which is unsure. And then the last argument, I really find it very interesting. He talks about the social dimension of brain death. And he says the following. He says, even if we agree that the brain death is diagnosed in a correct way, and everything we don't doubt in medicine, and so on and so on. But he said that there's the diagnosis of brain death has a dimension which is dangerous in a social meaning. Why? Because you say if someone really dies and passes away completely, he's cold, he doesn't breathe anymore, no heartbeat, and so on. He said that everyone sees him and knows this person passed away. Really, even children see a deceased person, say his death, and it's completely clear. But he said the problem is if we have brain death people, and the medical staff now will say, okay, he's dead now. Let's take some organs from him. Do you allow us to take his organs? He said that he seems to be alive. He seems to be alive. Yeah? He's still breathing. He seems to be still breathing. He seems this heart is still beating and so on. 1 minute? Yes, 1 minute. Yeah, it's 1:30. Yeah. Because this last idea found it really very interesting in this discussion. They said, even if we agree that this person passed away, but we don't see it. We don't see that pass away. So if the doctors come now and say, okay, let's take some organs from him, he said probably after that, after that situation, the relatives and the family of this person will say probably he was still alive, but they wanted his organs. And so there's a kind of, that the trust between the people and the medical staff will be damaged by this organ explantation. So I heard this and I really thought it's an interesting point. I really thought it's a very, very deep and interesting point. But I'm not working in the medical field. I never saw any people in this situation. About 10 years ago, there was new in Germany, and there was a family from Afghanistan, and I know them very well, good friends, and they had a 15-year-old son, and he had an accident and was brought to hospital and say he's brain death. So they called me and said the doctors they want to ask us about organ transplantation, and they asked me to come because they know that I have something to do with this Islamic medicine thing, and so probably I can support them. So I went there. And there was two strange things. The first thing was, there was a mother and a father from Afghanistan, and they couldn't. The German is very weak. They're completely paralyzed and shocked by the situation, of course. And a 15-year-old boy just passed away some hours ago. And there's a committee of like 6-7 doctors, German doctors. Do you want that the passing away of your son can be useful for another person and can save life of another person? Yes or no? I mean, what I want to say is a kind of really dangerous pressure which is put on these people. Yeah? And to say that they've really decided about organ explantation or not, it's really difficult to say that's a free decision. Yeah? The second point was interesting for me, why I mentioned it now, is that after that meeting, they told me, the family told me I should come and see Hassan. Yeah? Hassan was now in the intensive care. And I came in, and this first time, and I wrote about this brain death thing, but I never saw a brain death person. Yeah, and so I came in and I saw him lying there, yeah, with his intubation and his the breathing machine and all the things. Yeah, and he was really like a sleeping child. He was just sleeping, completely peaceful, but you know, he's a sleeping person. I don't talk about that brain that is wrong or something, but the social dimension is interesting. Yeah, and he was lying there, his mother sitting on his side, crying, and she's analphabet. She's from Afghanistan. She cannot write and read. And she said, "Why don't they do anything? They should make an operation. They should make anything. Why nobody cares about him?" Yeah? And you know, to explain her, no, he's deaf. And you know, she holds his hand, and his hand is warm, and he makes some small movements, and you know, it's really difficult thing, and the social dimension of this and the emotional dimension of this is really difficult. Yeah. So I just showed you all the things, not to make any doubts about organ transplantation, but just to show how the people discuss the things. Yeah, and the discussions are sometimes really deep. Should we stop here? Yes. So Mohammed, I will, if it's okay, I will like 5 minutes or something like this. I will just make the last point, end of life decisions. Or should we start with questions now? Whatever you like. Yeah. Okay. Good. I try to make it very short. End of life decisions means that we have like terminal ill patients in the hospital, like suffering from like cancer and things like this, and we ask now, what can we do? What can we do to help this person, and what are we allowed to do in this situation, and what is our obligation towards this person? Okay. So one thing which is in the Islamic literature very well known, and we find it in like, I never found anything else, is that like active euthanasia is not allowed in Islam. This is a general remark. It's not allowed to do anything really to end to stop the life of this person. Okay. But the question is it allowed to reduce the treatment or to stop the treatment? And this is a very important question. And a passive, how do you call it? Passive, is it passive euthanasia, or I don't know how to call it in English. Is it, do we have the obligation to do everything for this patient to make his life longer? And this is a very important point, because what I hear in German hospitals is that all the doctors and medical staff, they tell me, these Muslim families, they're so difficult. The Muslim family, they all the time, they ask for like maximal treatment, and we have to do everything, and we are not allowed to kill him, and please do, and please, and so on, yeah? And here we ask about what is the perspective? There seems to be a mentality of we need to do maximal treatment. We have to do everything that the life of this person goes on. Okay, and this makes a lot of problems in Europe, especially now, and the problems become more because the so-called guest workers in Germany, for example, they become older. And so you have more and more Muslim patients in hospitals and in palliative care and so on. So the topic has more is more important now than 20 years ago. And we asked, is this mentality of do everything you can for him, is this supported by Islamic law or not? The question is no. The answer is no. We are allowed to say to reject certain treatments, and we're allowed to not to do everything we can if we are not sure that this treatment will be good for the patient. And this is a very, very important thing, a practically important thing. For example, you have like a cancer patient in terminal stage, and the doctors say, for example, we can try another chemotherapy. Yeah, we can try not to add another therapy on. We will not save his life, of course, but probably there will be a benefit of like some weeks of longer life prolongation and things like this. And the question is, from Islamic point of view, do we have to say yes or don't we have to say yes? And here, it's in the fiqh of Islam, it would be the question is, what is the legal regulation of medical treatment? Is medical treatment fard, means obligating, or is it allowed? Is it jaiz or mubah? Or is it mustahab, means English, better to do? Or is it makruh? Is it better not to do? Or is it haram? And this, we have these 5 regulations in Islam. The highest one is fard. You have to do something. You have to pray, for example. The opposite is haram. You're not allowed to drink alcohol. Yeah? In between, there's the mubah, the allowed things. Yeah, I'm allowed to drink water now. I'm allowed not to drink water. It's I'm allowed to have a blue shirt or a green shirt or whatever. Yeah, this is allowed. And in between this, between the allowed and the fard, there are the things which are good to do. For example, giving sadaqah, giving charity. Yeah. And between the allowed and the haram, the forbidden, is like the things which are better not to do, like using too much water, for example. Yeah? And so the question here is in medical treatment is, what kind of medical treatment is fard, is obligating, and so on. And here, there's a very interesting text of Ibn Taymiyyah, a scholar in the 14th century in Damascus. He's a very influential and a very influential writer, and he said a very interesting thing. He said, the medical treatment is an obligation in some cases, and it's allowed to make it in some cases, it's forbidden to make it in some cases. So in which cases it's an obligation to get a medical treatment. He says, if an illness is dangerous for your life or for your body, and in the same time, you know that there's a treatment, and this treatment is shown to be very, very successful. For example, everyday case, how do you call it in English? Appendicitis. What? Appendicitis. Thank you very much. So this is, I think half of the people made it, had it. If you, it's something. If you don't treat it, in the last consequence, if you don't do anything, you will die from it, right? If you go to a hospital, there's a small surgery which takes like 10 minutes, and in 99% more, it will be successful, and it's not dangerous, and so on. So, and in this case, you have to get medical treatment. That's one thing. Second case is in which situation it is better to get the medical treatment. He said, and mustahab. He said, when you have something like a kind of illness or illness, which is not dangerous for your life and not dangerous for your body, but prevents you to make your everyday work. For example, you have some work, you have something to do, you wake up in the morning with very strong headache. Yeah? And you know, if you take now like a ibuprofen or something, ibuprofen or anything like this, it will be treated. Yeah? But it's not a danger for your life. So here it's better to get the treatment. So now we come to the mubah, to the neutral category. And this is very important for these questions. If there's an illness and there's a treatment, but the benefit of the treatment is not clear, then it's allowed to take the treatment, it's allowed not to take it. And this is the case in the most of like, how do you call it, progressed, for example, cancer situations and things like this. Yeah? When the doctor said, okay, Annie, we can try another chemotherapy, we can try this, we can try that, but I mean, we don't know if it's any benefit. Then he said, in sometimes it's makruh, it's better not to do it. Yeah. Speaking about cancer, about terminal ill patients, if you know or if you expect that this treatment, the damage of the treatment will be more than the benefit. And this is also in many kind of palliative like chemotherapies. Yeah, you know that it makes the life of the patient more difficult. But it will not benefit him. Or even nutrition in terminal ill patients. Sometimes it makes the situation of the people more difficult if they eat and drink, right? But the family, what will they do? I mean, it's really difficult to see someone dying. Yeah? It's really difficult, yeah? And you cannot do anything, yeah. And of course, like giving food is something which means caring, which means giving love, giving affection, and so on. Yeah? And our instinct is, okay, give him something, will make him stronger. Yeah? But at the same time, in a certain stage of an illness, it will be bad for him. And there's a very interesting hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. لا تكرهوا مرضاكم على الطعام فإن الله يطعمهم ويسقيهم. Don't force your sick people, as your sick relatives, to eat, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them eat and drink. Very, very interesting narration. Eh? So, and now the last question, and then we will stop, is when we say in some cases medical treatment could be haram. Yeah? And this is very strange. Even classically in the pre-modern literature, we find that the people the authors which write about this seem to to say like some strange, and there are some people who claim that medical treatment could be haram. Yeah, like they feel ashamed about this, what are these extremists talking about? Yeah, but if you think about it logically, there are some medical treatments which I think will be haram in the people of in the eyes of Muslims and non-Muslims. What could it be? For example, you have a rich white American man who needs a kidney. Yeah? And you have a beautiful, fresh kidney from a child from India. And this is happening every day. Yeah, and organ traffic, and selling organs. Everyone would say, if you think about it, it's not allowed to destroy the body of an innocent child to heal like another person, right? So even the category of haram could be a category of medical treatment. Good. I will stop here. Sorry for taking too much time, and if you have any questions.